So far all we've learned is declare a variable. So let's learn a few more things. And here I have a variable in a function. I could also declare a variable outside of a function. If I do it like this, it's not going to like it. Let me zoom in. Right? And then print line Z and format. It's already saying eh, right? It won't even let me run it. Let me just bring this up and we'll throw an error. Right? Non-declaration statement outside function body. I can do this. Oh no, that might not be right. There we go. Var z, variable z, is an int and it's equal to 39. I could have also done it like this. That's one way. I could have also done var z, well, I don't need commas there. Could have also done var z int. Whoa. Let me format all this. So there's another way. So you could also declare a variable with var. So it's the keyword var, the identifier, and then the type. And then you could also assign it to a value to it. Okay? And you'll notice when I do var z int, it sets that to 0. And if I do var z string, and this is recompiling, so z doesn't exist when I run this again, right? It runs top to bottom. That's the code execution, you know. And now it's just empty string. You don't see it there, but it's empty string. If I print y once more, we'll see that there's a space that's been taken up between 49ers, right? Right there is an empty string. Right there, empty string. Because the 0 value of a string is empty string. The 0 value of an int is 0. You know, the 0 value of float 64 is 0. So this is the 0 value.
You're not allowed to use colon equals outside.
No, can't use colon equals outside of a func. Yeah, it has to be inside of a func. And so sometimes we do a 0 value for a variable. We don't want to store anything in it yet. We'll want to use it later. We'll put something in it. We just do var z int, and it gives you a 0 value. You don't assign it to anything. So these are the pieces you need to know for declaring and using variables. One is always use the shorthand operator. Okay, and easy, you could do, you know, TUVW. I don't know. So always use the shorthand operator when declaring a variable inside of a function. You could do multiple declarations and assignments in the same line, and they could be of different types, and you could have as many of them as you want. And if you're going to declare outside of a function, you do var z or var identifier type. And if you don't set it equal to a value, it sets it equal to the 0 value, which is, you know, for numbers 0, for string empty string. For a lot of other stuff, it's nil. You can look in the language specification to read 0 value. What does it assign it to for the different types? And you could also use that to assign a value to it outside. And then this is accessible anywhere in the package. Okay. So the one thing I will say, since we're kind of like looking at types, anybody have questions about that? Is if I go to, I'm just going to bookmark this. Add it to Go. If we go to the language spec, what was I going to show you? Yeah, language spec. I should put in golang spec. Here are all my different types. Method sets, which we're not really going to worry about. You don't need to know that for this class. Bools, numeric types, string types. We have arrays, which we don't use. They're used for building slices. Slices are the equivalent of lists in Python. Are they lists? Is that what you call them, right? You call them a list in Python? No Python people in here? And then we have structs, which are data structures for holding structured data. So it's basically, you know, Go is somewhat object-oriented. You could go to the Golang fact and read about Go and their perspective on object orientation. But, you know, this is where we could collect different variables of different types in a data structure. So I just create a structure to hold a whole bunch of other pieces of data. When we use templates for web, we're going to pass in data to the template. We'll use a struct and put all of our data into that struct and then pass that in, and then our template will have access to it to populate the page, right? And functions are a type. There's interfaces and then maps, right? So a map for a key value. So we'll learn about these. We'll see these, a map for a key value. And, I might use a map for all the students in this room and their age. And the key would be your name, right? And then the value would be your age. And anytime I wanted to access it, I'd put your name in and show me the value, right? So it's a key value storage as a map. All right, so those are the different types in Go. I'm just looking at this. I'm going to show you a little bit about reading documentation. And so godoc.org is where we go for reading documentation. Let me just stop this video and then we'll do documentation in the next one. So main thing you should have here, always use the shorthand operator, short declaration operator for creating variables inside functions. And you could do multiple declarations and assignments. And outside of it, use var. Can't use the short declaration operator outside of a function. So outside any code block. And then var set to just this type, the identifier, which is the name of the variable, and the type, which is its value, right? That is the 0 value. And then we could also assign it like this. So let me just say the last thing about type, and then we'll do documentation. When I look at the numeric types, when I first came here, and I'm just learning to code, right? And I'm learning with Go, which I'm learning on my own. And I was reading a book that was originally written in Chinese, translated to English, because when I first started learning it, there weren't a lot of books out yet. But I was like, oh, dear Lord, there's all kinds of types. I have to make a decision if it's an int, uint 8, an int 8, an int 16, a float 32. Gosh, they're really splitting hairs here. And you could, right, if you're worried about memory, okay, let me save space, use a shorter one. I don't need a big number here. You could figure all that out, But basically what we use is int. That's it, int, or float 64 as our types, okay? Or string. Sometimes you'll see byte, which is an alias for uint 8, or a rune, which is an alias for int 32. A rune is a character, uses UTF-8. And so UTF-8 could be 1 to 4 bytes, and 4 bytes is 32 zeros and 1, so it's 32. Int 32. So that's it for declaring variables. Any questions on that? That's all you need to know about declaring variables. That's a big part. Next thing is I want to show you just a little bit about type. We've been talking about types. So let's read documentation. And so first part of this video is declaring. Next part is reading documentation. So I go to godoc.org and I search for fumpt. This is package fumpt from the standard library. I go to package fumpt and it tells me about the package here. I could go to the index. I could look through the different functions which are available in this index. So these functions, none of them have a receiver. And we'll learn what receivers are, but that's basically how you do methods. Attach a method to a type. You attach methods to types. An int can have a method in Go. Because an int's a type, and you can attach a method to it. Weird. You could attach a method to any type. Right? Mostly you're going to attach methods to structs. Here's like my employee struct, and it has fields like first name, last name, employee ID. Now let me attach some methods to that struct, because a struct's a type, and then, it's kind of like object orientation. But we're not talking about objects, we're talking about types, which is weird. It's different. So it's just, we have a language for talking about the language, and this is the language we use for talking about Go. So you'll whatever, it's theory until you see it in action. So these are, none of these have receivers. It goes func, and there's no receiver, and it's straight to the identifier. So there's the identifier. Hey, what's up? Sorry, man, I didn't think I got your hangout. How are you doing? Good. Come on in. Are you going to be in the class?
I hope so.
Cool. Glad you're here. Oh, stuck at work. Okay, now I'm reading it. Everybody, this is Gentry. Everybody. Glad you're here, man. So, the other thing which is interesting here when we start reading this documentation, so we have functions, we have the identifier, right? And then we have what does it take, right? Those first curlies. And then we have the returns. So what does it return? And so one of the things which is interesting is here you have a ... interface. And so this is a variadic parameter. And that means vary. It could take many things. ... in language often means like, the other day I went to the beach and there was a volleyball tournament and I entered. It was pretty incredible, ... like fill in the rest, right? You could add more stuff here, And so that's what the ... means. It means you could add as many arguments as you want to that function when you call it. So when you declare a function, just diction, the language we use to talk about programming, the parameters are what you declare. Hey, it's going to take, these are the parameters that it'll, you say these are the parameters, they go here. When you call it, it takes arguments. You pass in arguments, right? Here, pass this one in. So those are interchangeable. People use them interchangeable, parameters and arguments, but I just kind of wanted to be precise a little bit. So so when you see the ... it could take in many things. So let's look at print line. In Gentry, all we've done so far is this is the short variable declaration operator, and you can only use it inside a function. So W equals 12.5. You could do multiple variable declarations and assignments with the short variable operator. You could only use that inside a function, and you can print it all out. Outside of a function, you do the var, the identifier, the type, and then you could also set it equal to something, assign something to it if you want. So now inside here, I was going to show you how you could pass in multiple things. Right? It takes multiple arguments. It's a variadic parameter. Because when we look at print line, func print line from package fumpt. So when we call it, it's fumpt, right? When we call this, it's which package? Well, it's from package fumpt, it's this function, right? From package fumpt, it's this function. And so print line is variadic, and it takes an unlimited number of arguments of type interface. Empty interface. An interface is a type. Golang spec. The interface is a type. And an interface allows you to do polymorphism in Go, meaning morph, changing, poly, many. So I could have one function that could change its functionality based upon what it receives. It could receive many things, and it could operate in different ways based upon what it receives. And so in Java, we talk about abstract classes or interfaces, right? Abstract and interfaces. I'm not a big Java programmer. So here, the interfaces, an empty interface is basically any type, because every type implements the empty interface, and we'll understand that more in a little bit. So it could take anything. When you see empty interface, that means any type, anything can go in here. Everything implements the empty interface. So that could take any type multiple times. So I threw in here a float, an int, a string, another float, and a string. And when I run it, it prints them all out. And so just reading the documentation, this one is cool. We have printf. So we just learned print line, now printf. And printf takes a formatter, which is a string, and then an unlimited number of arguments, and returns an int and an array. So what is a formatter? If you read this up here and just search for format, right? The value in default format, the format verbs are derived from C's but simpler. %v, %t gives me the type. All right, well, let's try that. That'd be interesting. %t gives me the type. So I'm going to come back over here, and I'm going to try using, this time, printf. And I'm going to pass in the type, which will be a string, or the format verb, and I'm going to go with %t for type, and this. All right, there's all these format verbs up here. So let's go over here, and I'm just going to take all this out. Let me zoom in. W, declared not used. Int, float64 string, float64 string. Well, let me put in some spaces. So escape new lines. Int, float64 string, float64 string. So it showed me the type of each variable. So I could use that printf to see the type. So why don't you try using printf with a format verb %t. Better yet, what I want you to do is I want you to declare an int 42, and I want you to use a format verb, so you have to go look it up, to print this in hexadecimal. So this is what you want to change right here. This is your code, except for right there, you're going to have some format verb which will print this in hexadecimal, and this needs to be W. Okay? So print 42 in hexadecimal.